Good Saturday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for August the 26th. Today we are reading together the last chapter in 2 Samuel, the last chapter in the Samuel scroll, which is chapter 24. I haven't mentioned this yet specifically. I probably should have done that, so forgive me for not doing so. But these last four chapters within 2 Samuel form this kind of appendix of some just random, well, it might seem random, these random events that had took place within David's reign. And yet, these four chapters do present to us a good chiasm, which a chiasm is a type of a literal or a structure in literature in which you have things that match up with one another. So a very basic chiasm would be something like A, B, C, C, B, A. So you have here, and that's really what we have within these last four chapters. We have 6 sections within these last 4 chapters. The first section and the 6th section, they line up with one another. Both of them involve sin of the nation, or sin that is bringing about negative consequences upon the nation. In chapter 21, in verses 1 through 14, we see Saul's sin and his family, Saul and his family's sin of trying to eradicate the Gibeonites, bringing a consequence upon the nation that having to be dealt with. And then here in chapter 24, we have David's sin pertaining to the census that he's going to take that ends up causing issues within Israel as well. So those two go together. Those are the 2 A's. You also have the 2 B's, which are victories that are described of the warriors within Israel. In chapter 21 and verses 15 through 22, we have the defeating of numerous giants. I think there was 4 giants, that were specifically mentioned as being defeated. And then in chapter 23 and verses 8 through 39, we have David's mighty men that are described within that text. So the 2nd and the 5th events go together. And then we have in the middle section, which is normally the focal point. Chiasms are normally used as focal points, or to help draw the reader's mind to a particular point as the focal point. We have David's songs, his song of thanksgiving in chapter 22, and then also his song of the covenant that is described in chapter 23 and verses 1 through 7. So again, you have really here within chapters 21 through 24 of 2 Samuel a chiasm, A, B, C, C, B, A. Again, that being Saul's sin and David's sin, it being the Philistines defeated and the mighty warriors and their victories, and then David's song of thanksgiving and then David's song of the covenant that are found in the middle sections there in chapters 22 and 23. So that's just a little something to add to your knowledge of this text. And I encourage you, as you're reading through scripture, see if you can notice those type of things that pop up in the text. Again, those are literary devices that are used in order for the author to try to show something to the reader. So that's just a little extra tidbit for you from 2 Samuel. Let me get the text of 2 Samuel chapter 24 up on the screen, and we'll read together here about David's military census and the issues surrounding that and the consequences, and then David's further action. There's a lot going on here in chapter 24. So let's read about that here. 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse number 1. Yahweh's anger, 2 Samuel 24, verse number 1, burned against Israel again, and he stirred up David against them to say, "Go, count the people of Israel and Judah." So the king said to Joab, the commander of his army, "Go through all of the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba and register the troops so I can know their number." Joab replied to the king, "May Yahweh your God multiply the troops 100 times more than they are, while my lord the king looks on. But why does my lord the king want to do this?" Yet the king's order prevailed over Joab and the commanders of the army. So Joab and the commanders of the army left the king's presence to register the troops of Israel. They crossed the Jordan and camped in Aroer, south of the town in the middle of the valley, and then proceeded toward Gad and Yazir. They went to Gilead in the land of the Hittites and continued to Dan Jaan and around to Sidon. They went to the fortress of Tyre and all the cities of the Hivites and Canaanites. Afterward, they went to the Negev of Judah and Beersheba. When they had gone through the whole land, they returned to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. Joab gave the king the total of the registration of the troops. There were 800,000 valiant armed men from Israel and 5,000 men from Judah. David's conscience troubled him after he had taken the census of the troops. He said to Yahweh, I have sinned greatly in what I've done. Now, Yahweh, because I have been very foolish, please take away your servant's guilt. When David got up in the morning, the word of Yahweh had come to the prophet God, David's seer. Go and say to David, this is what Yahweh says. I am offering you 3 choices. Choose one of them, and I will do it to you. So God went to David, told him, or Gad, I should say. So Gad differentiated a little bit there. So Gad went to David, told him the choices, and asked him, do you want 3 years of famine to come on your land, to flee from your foes 3 months while they pursue you, or to have a plague in your land 3 days? Now consider carefully what answer I should take back to the one who sent me. David answered Gad, I have great anxiety. Please let us fall into Yahweh's hands, because his mercies are great. But don't let me fall into human hands. So Yahweh sent a plague on Israel from that morning until the appointed time, and from Dan to Beersheba, 70,000 men died. Then the angel extended his hand toward Jerusalem to destroy it. But Yahweh relented concerning the destruction and said to the angel who was destroying the people, enough, withdraw your hand now. The angel of Yahweh was then at the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. When David saw the angel striking the people, he said to Yahweh, look, I am the one who has sinned. I am the one who has done wrong. But these sheep, what have they done? Please let your hand be against me and my family. Gad came to David and that day and said to him, go up and set up an altar to Yahweh on the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. David went up in obedience to Gad's command, just as Yahweh had commanded, and Araunah looked down and saw the king and his servants coming toward him. So he went out and paid homage to the king with his face to the ground. Araunah said, why has my lord the king come to his servants? David replied, to buy the threshing floor from you in order to build an altar to Yahweh, so the plague on the people may be halted. Araunah said to David, my lord the king may take whatever he wants and offer it. Here are the oxen for a burnt offering, and the threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your majesty, Araunah, gives everything here to the king. Then he said to the king, may Yahweh your God accept you. The king answered Araunah, no, I insist on buying it from you for a price. For I will not offer to Yahweh my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 20 ounces of silver. He built an altar to Yahweh there and offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then Yahweh was receptive to prayer for the land, and the plague on Israel ended. That is 2 Samuel chapter 24. The text begins with Yahweh's anger burning against Israel again. And if you go back to chapter 21, you see something very similar as well. Again, that's concerning the sin of Saul there with the Gibeonites. It just talks about how there was a famine on the land. And David's thinking, this is strange. I should consult Yahweh. And he finds out that the famine is a result of Yahweh's anger against Israel, or really against Saul and the people, or against Saul and his family for what he had done against the Gibeonites. And that guilt was now hanging upon the people. Here, there is something that has ignited the Lord's anger. And the text says that he stirred up David against them to say, go and count the people of Judah. Now, if you read what is said in 1 Chronicles 21 and verse number 1, we see in that text that actually says that Satan is the one who stirred up David to take this census. So which is it? Was it Yahweh or was it Satan? I think the answer could be both, that Yahweh is using the temptation that Satan is putting before him in order to bring this about, in order to highlight the sin that is present within the land. We don't know exactly what that is, but it is present. So David, he gives into this temptation. He gives into this opportunity to measure his strength. And that's really what a census did, is a census allowed the king to understand, how great is the fighting force? How strong is my army? And that seems to be the issue that is at hand here, especially once they get done and they bring back not the census of the entire nation. They don't count every single person, but instead they focus on the size of the fighting force, that they're going to be 800,000 valiant armed men from Israel and 500,000 men from Judah. So that seems to be the focus here, and an opportunity for David to judge the strength of his army. And yet we need to recognize that that's not what David should be concerned with at all. It's not the strength of his army that brings about victory, but it is Yahweh who brings about victory, no matter the size of the army that he might be supporting. Now, it's interesting that Joab here in this moment actually kind of tries to get David to reconsider whether or not this is something that he needs to do. Why does my lord the king want to do this? But David's orders prevailed, and they end up going. They go all around the farthest reaches of Israel's territory, and they end up taking this census. So again, it comes back. I think verse number 9 is the answer to verse number 1. That it is 800,000 valiant men from Israel, 500,000 from Judah. Well, after this happens, we see verse number 10 that David's conscience troubled him about this, knowing that he had taken this census whenever it wasn't something that Yahweh had commanded him to do. Then he recognizes that this is a sin that he's committed against Yahweh, and he confesses that, and he asks that Yahweh would take away the guilt from him. Whenever David gets up in the morning, the text tells us that Yahweh had gone to his prophet Gad. Excuse me. He had gone to his prophet Gad, and he told Gad to go and to basically allow David to pick the punishment that he was going to receive. That you can either choose for there to be 3 years of famine, there could be 3 months where you are on the run from your enemies, or you can have 3 years of some sort of plague on the land. Consider it carefully, and then come back and let me know what you want to do. It seems from David's answer here that he would rather fall into Yahweh's hands because his mercies are great. If there's a famine for 3 years, then the people are going to have to rely upon the nations outside of Israel, and that's certainly not someplace you want to be. If it's 3 months of him on the run, again, he's already done this whenever it came to him running from Saul, he realized that wasn't fun. But again, he would be at the mercies of someone else. But he would rather much so be at the mercy of Yahweh. He knows his mercies are great, and he would rather fall into Yahweh's hands than into the hands of men. So that's what Yahweh allows to happen. He allows this plague to come upon Israel for the span of 3 days. It says that the angel extended his hand toward Jerusalem to destroy it. Actually, I should not skip verse 15. It says that the plague was on Israel from the morning until the appointed time, and from Dan to Beersheba, 70,000 men died. So that great number has now lessened some. Again, where's your confidence? Is your confidence in God or in military might? But as the angel is going toward Jerusalem to destroy it, Yahweh calls him off, said, that is enough. You can withdraw your hand now. And he did that at the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. This is Jerusalem. And we're going to end up finding out later on in 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1, that this actually ends up being the place where the temple is constructed, which is just very interesting to consider. Now, David in verse 17 shows the type of heart that he has as he's looking about and he sees the death that is coming upon his people. He's disturbed by this. He's very much distressed by it as well. And him being someone who has a shepherd's heart says, don't disturb the sheep for the sins of the shepherd. Let it come upon me. Again, I think this shows the good heart that David has. Does he make the right decision every time? No. Again, reading through 2 Samuel here and going back to 1 Samuel as well, I've been struck by the number of poor decisions that David has made. Does that negate the reality that he's a man after God's own heart? No, absolutely not. Again, it's about the pattern of his life. But even throughout his life, there were times whenever his focus wasn't where it needs to be. His faith wasn't what it ought to have been, and he made bad decisions. Well, here we see the type of man that David really is. He cares for people, and he desires for them to be spared and not to suffer for his own failures. But the reality is that sometimes happens. Other people do suffer for our mistakes. Eventually, Gad does come to David. He comes on that day and says, this is what you need to do. You need to go set up this altar at the threshing floor of Araunah. Again, this is the place where the angel had last been, and you need to set up this altar, offer sacrifices, and we'll go from there. So he goes to this place. Araunah sees him coming. He pays homage to David. He asks what David might want. David tells him what's going on, and Araunah says, fine, you can have it. Just take the threshing floor. Here's the oxen. Here's some wood from their yoke that you can use. All of this is yours to do what you need to do. And yet, David says, no. I'm going to pay you. This needs to cost me something. And I think this is a tremendous lesson for us to think about as we finish out this read through 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, the scroll of Samuel, is what David says. He says, no, I intend on buying it from you for a price, for I will not offer to Yahweh my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. His faith in God, he recognized, needed to cost him something. His offerings needed to cost him something. And we see throughout this text that everything we do is going to cost us something. Let's go back as we conclude here. We'll look first at the end of the text. Then Yahweh was receptive to prayer for the land, and the plague on Israel ended. Think about the story of Samuel, the scroll of Samuel. Go all the way back to Hannah. What did her faith in God cost her? Well, she gained a son, but then she paid the price of giving up her son for Yahweh. What did Eli's decision-making cost him? Well, his decision-making, the way he parented, cost him his sons. What about Saul? What price did he pay for his decision-making, the way that he lived his life? Well, his sanity and the honor that would come with being a powerful and successful king of Israel. What about David? David gave up much of himself, and it cost him himself in order to be exalted in God's sight. But there were other times whenever he paid the price for sin. So in everything that is done, we have to pay a cost of some sort. That gets back to the principle. Again, you've heard me say this before. I think the only thing I really took away from college, especially my minor degree in in business administration, was the principle of opportunity cost. Everything you do comes with a cost. You might gain something, but you have to give up something else in order to gain it, and vice versa. So you might think it's a beautiful day outside, but if you want to go outside and enjoy this beautiful day, it's going to come with the cost of being hot. Otherwise, on the other hand, you could stay inside, but what do you not get? Well, you don't get to enjoy the beautiful creation that is outside. So again, everything that we do comes with a cost. David says here, I need to pay the cost of this offering. I need to do that. There needs to be some skin in the game that I give to God in this. We're in this situation because of my mistake. I need to pay for that. Not the people, but I do. I need to pay. And again, it just shows to me again, the heart that David has is a good one. Mistakes he made, yes, but his heart still seemed to always, even if it wandered for a time, it got back where it needed to be. And I hope that's the type of heart that we have, that even if we might make a mistake, even if we might have a moment in a valley for whatever reason, may our hearts find their way back to God. May they be set on God. May they always know where they need to be, and that is focused on the Lord and what he would have us to do. And in doing so, we'll be willing to pay any cost that might come with being a faithful servant of God. I really appreciate you reading along with me through the Samuel scroll. We will get into the books of 1st and 2nd Kings next in our read tomorrow. If you have any questions or comments about our text today, please feel free to leave that in the comments section. I'm really excited about getting into Kings tomorrow. I know there'll be another great read we have here within this portion of the text. Three big chunks of the text: 1 Samuel, and Second Samuel, which is the Samuel scroll. First and Second Kings, the book of the Kings, and then First and Second Chronicles, again, the book of the Chronicles of Israel. Some of these things are going to overlap and they're going to be redundant, but as we've already seen, there's going to be some different angles that we'll have to look at from these various stories. I'm really excited about reading through this with you, and I hope that this has helped you to understand the text better, to have a better knowledge of God's word, and that you have taken a lot of lessons away from it to be a better follower of Jesus yourself. Again, thanks for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your Saturday. May God bless you in all that you do, and hope I'll see you again in the morning as we read together beginning in 1 Kings chapter 1. Take care, and God bless.